that. Okay, so it's recording there. Facebook Live. Go live, bottom corner. Let's try this again. Here and more. Live on Facebook. In a group.
You're going to be an expert at the end of all this.
I hope so.
Oh, you're live, I think.
Is it?
It says recording, live, preparing. So it looks like it's almost up.
Choose where you want to. Fetching last year. Okay. Awesome. I'm going to do this. I'm just tagging you in the at Tania Semper. That's what I want. Great. Title, branding, and go live. Setting for meeting for Facebook Live.
I think we're live.
Are we live?
It says live on
Okay,
Facebook.
we're live. Okay, that's great. Awesome. So I'll figure this out as we get going. But Tania, so excited to have you as a guest on our podcast. This is the Practice Accelerator Podcast, where we look at everything to do with dentistry, the entrepreneurial world of dentistry, and how to grow practices. And so having you on the show, I'm super excited about. One, because bringing an expertise outside, I think, of the specific vertical of dentistry will be a contribution to the community. And I think what I'm excited to have kind of achieve at the end of this podcast is to get people thinking differently, have them consider new things, and just how they look at their business. And so super excited to have you on here. So just a little bit of a background for folks, and why they should listen in, or at least consider what you have to say. So we have a few kind of notes on Tania here. So Tania Semper is a Canadian award-winning entrepreneur, podcaster, and branding maven who thrives on making sustainability sexy. She owns Pamper Splurge, a creative branding and digital marketing consultancy that specializes in producing photo, video shoots, stellar social media content, and digital marketing campaigns for local as well as international brands. Tania Semper, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. This is so exciting. Congrats on launching this podcast. I feel like you've chosen such an interesting industry, because when it comes to dentistry, there is such a stigma. Even for myself, when I think about going to the dentist, I have this feeling of fear and the unknown. Are they going to find out? Is it going to, just the whole experience, I feel like needs to be rebranded, remarketed. And again, we need to change the stigma so that people feel more welcomed when they go there, and the space is more inviting. And of course, that all comes down to really good marketing and really good branding.
Totally. So we're like, this is going to be an open conversation, basically like what you and I would talk about, but people can watch and listen in. And I think one of the questions that folks would probably ask is, what is branding? I've heard people say that, well, isn't that just the logo? Isn't that my colors? Isn't that the font I use? How would you define branding?
Okay, so before we get right into that, what I wanted to give your listeners and viewers a background on is specifically my experience working with physicians. So while I work in branding, and of course branding can be transferred over to just about any industry, what's important to note is that I did work in the field of medical aesthetics, and I did work with physiologists, I worked with nurses as well, physicians, plastic surgeons, that sort of thing. And my mandate was to rebrand and help them market their practice, whether it be treatments that were lifting and sculpting the body, or whether it was just skin resurfacing, that sort of thing. And what was really interesting, while I was working at this medical aesthetic company, there were quite a few dentists that were interested in Beverly Hills, for instance, where looking good is so top of mind. So I just wanted to throw that out there for your audience, and as well as any dentists that are located within Canada that obviously follow you. It is in terms of part of your brand strategy is to diversify your revenue stream and your offering to not only do dentist related services, but also expand your offering and going into aesthetic services as well.
That's awesome. I think
Yeah.
part of, well, one, thanks for sharing that. And I think that sets up context on like why your perspective would be, something to consider. And then just before that, you were talking about, the dentist visit and the anxiety piece of it. And I think
Yeah.
that, that's definitely an important piece. And then the other thing is that some folks, we've got clients in the US and in Canada, and, I talk to dentists all over. And the other piece of it is, as folks buy dental offices, they inherit the brand and the business and everything. And
Yeah.
so as an entrepreneur, you're like, okay, I need to get chair time, that's productive chair time. And so, a dentist would be just trying to get people to fill in the day and start working on it,
Yeah.
and not necessarily think that, oh, okay, I'm, ABC Main Street dentist, because that's what I bought this pre-existing practice. Or maybe they buy a practice and they just name it after themselves, or something. Smile today, smile something, usually.
Yeah.
And so I think that it's not necessarily a bad thing, because the focus, I can understand and relate that the focus is on, I have a skill set, I want to generate revenue, I'm buying a small business. I don't know all of the pieces, but I do know the only way I can get paid or generate revenue is doing work. And so, why, I guess, should folks for a second consider branding? What should they consider? What is it? Maybe we
Yeah.
could start there.
Yeah. Okay. So what is branding? Branding is when you look at a logo, or you go to a store, or and you look at it as a whole and you feel something. Okay. So branding, especially effective branding, is all about emotion. How a brand communicates their brand message, the vibe that they're, the look, the feel, it's really a feeling. Okay, so branding, effective branding, obviously comes with a logo. It doesn't mean that establishing a really good logo ultimately means that you'll be successful. Of course not. Sometimes there are some really terrible logos that even myself, when there's a new company that launches, I'm like, oh my God, they are never, what were they thinking creating a logo like that? Or even a name. But what's important is everything that follows after that. So while the logo is the first thing, it's basically the first representation of your brand. So that's why most brand specialists will always advise that you build a strong logo and understand what your overall goal is for your brand, because it starts with the logo, but then it's, okay, so what follows after? What kind of experience you want to offer your consumer?
Mm-hmm.
What are the fonts? What is the brand messaging and the verbiage? What's the style? How are you communicating on Facebook? How are you communicating on Instagram or LinkedIn? and you want to ensure consistency. So the biggest thing about branding, while you can't necessarily say, you can't detach it. What's interesting about this is a lot of companies will say, well, what kind of return on investment can I have from branding? If I were to do the logo, and then if I create a stellar marketing, some marketing assets and all that, and then I have the fonts and so on, what's the ROI on that? So
Yeah.
branding, you can't attach branding to ROI, because it's something that is a function, something that is extremely vital in your marketing plan, in your brand plan, but it's something that only translates into ROI in time and with consistency.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, because if you look at Coca-Cola, on their balance sheet, it'll say goodwill. And goodwill is like $1 billion, like just the brand, the goodwill of Coca-Cola, what it means to folks. And I've also read or heard that a brand is also a guarantee. And it ties, like you took it a step further, talking about it's a feeling, it's an emotion. So, when I think about brand as a guarantee, for instance, it's like if I go to McDonald's, a French fry here is going to be a French fry in a different city in Hong Kong, in Japan, Australia, wherever. I guarantee to get the same experience, whether it's good or bad. And I think that, to your point, it's a feeling. So what do I have positive emotions when I think about McDonald's or Coca-Cola? And then same thing. I think what you're even like jumping to a bit further with the dentist and like dentistry as a whole, what's the brand of dentistry? Is there a feeling there, a negative feeling, versus thinking of a pediatrician, there's happy feelings, you're dealing with babies, but the dentist is like, drilling, pain and all of that. So I think that's really interesting. So, talking about, I think that also what you're saying is understand what a brand is, that it has a feeling, and also for a second or a moment, period of time, let go of the ROI question or the focus on ROI at this minute, because with any brand that's built, it's worth nothing until you start producing value and customer experience around it. So
I'll give you the perfect example before you jump into something else, because you mentioned McDonald's and Coca-Cola. Now let's talk about Starbucks. When Starbucks initially launched, their logo encompassed the brand name around the logo, and it had a few different elements to it. Now, when you look at the logo, it's actually just the mermaid, and there's no Starbucks written, because the brand became so recognized around the world that it no longer needs to explain what it is. Okay. And the other thing is, for me, when I personally, I love Starbucks, but I don't particularly love their coffee. Okay. But I will go in a Starbucks because I like the feeling. Nowadays, not so much. I'm kind of supporting the more local type of coffee houses. However, what I really loved about Starbucks at the time, a few years ago, was walking in there, and I felt like I was buying into a lifestyle. I was proud to sip my coffee and walk along others, brushing shoulders on the streets with a nice Starbucks cup. It was the way it made me feel. It felt not exclusive, because of course anyone can go in and buy a Starbucks, but it was because it had that it's a more of a luxury experience to some degree, right? It's a premium coffee. So you kind of feel like, oh, I'm part of this crowd. Mm-hmm. So that's what I mean by branding is a feeling, because it's not only, it's basically it taps into every sense. So when you go into Starbucks, you're looking at everything, right? You're smelling the aromas. Or another aspect of Starbucks, and we'll go into more dentistry to make it more relatable, but another thing is, at one point they were thinking about diversifying and going into a lot of food available, but what was happening is that they were concentrating on expanding their offering, and they started offering food, and the food that they were making there was starting to affect the aroma of the coffee. And they noticed, while doing, obviously conducting research and so on, they noticed that there was a drop in traffic. There was a shift in their numbers, which was quite interesting. So after doing studies, they were able to relate it to the fact that it had something to do with the aromas and the food causing some type of negative effect. So now when you go there, you'll notice that a lot of their foods are prepackaged, and they'll heat it, but they won't actually grill it, whereas at one point they did. So that's just an example that's basically an example of powerful branding.
That's interesting. I think
Yeah.
um, there's a, with that coffee example, and you're saying that Starbucks is so recognizable, you don't use the words,
No.
and you've got other local coffee shops, and similarly with dentistry, like how many dentists graduate, how many thousands of schools are there across Canada, US, globally, and there's literally thousands of dentists graduating every year. How do
Yeah.
you stand out, right? So you have coffee
Mhm.
shops, local coffee shops, multinational chains, etc. And this is what I usually talk to with clients is, what is your expression of dentistry, right? You went to school with
Mhm.
a bunch of other guys and gals to graduate, and your expression of dentistry is like how the people you hire, how
Mhm.
your office hours, like all of that, and the way that you picked out the materials, the city you picked in, like the building you picked, like all of those
Mhm.
different decisions, whether you consciously are aware or not, they are
Yeah.
an expression of like who you are.
Yes.
Right, and also there's some constraints, like, oh, maybe you don't have a huge budget to buy exactly where you want to, but whatever it is, you bought it because you liked it. No one's forcing
Mhm.
you. You're making all of these choices and decisions based on your circumstances, and that's an expression of your dentistry. And I
Yeah.
think that is also that expression is really a brand, right? And so how do you
Mhm.
make that kind of unintentional piece become more intentional? And it's like, it's
Yes.
okay to have, and I think that's going to be your differentiator. I think that's where brands,
Mhm.
you having a brand, how do you stand out? Like there's, people say, I'll be there, I'll meet you, I'm 5 Starbucks away, because it's at every corner. And
Yeah.
same thing with dentists, they're like at every corner. How do you stand out? And I think one of the key ways is the branding, your
Mhm.
branding as an extension of your expression. Like Starbucks, their expression of coffee and delivery is, you go in, the colors, the experience, you
Yeah.
have to be able to say. So same thing within a clinic or within a dental practice, it's like, what is the experience all the way through, like the emails that you
Mhm.
get, is there even emails, their website, the in-office experience, like the digital
Yeah.
experience, and then the in-chair, the in-office experience. I think that's super critical. So like, what are some challenges, or what have you seen like works,
Mm.
like what's it, maybe even some of the mindset, because this may be new for dentists
Mhm.
that are either associates that haven't owned their clinic, or folks that do own their clinic but never thought of this and could be in their blind spot. um
Yeah.
yeah, you want to have some
Yeah, I'll
thoughts
touch
around
on
that?
that. So, what I was saying earlier, when I was working for the medical aesthetic company, at the time, this is many years ago, this was probably 5 years ago now. At the time, Botox and fillers and doing any type of cosmetic enhancement wasn't necessarily something that was talked about. It was very hush hush to some degree, very private, right? It was a woman's best kept secret, or a man's best kept secret. And then what happened was that through marketing, through changing the experience that patients have when they walk into a clinic, making it more accessible, more fun, more branded, everything from the way the individual at the desk greets you, the name on her tag, whether it's, it's not going to say aesthetic expert, but it could also be body shaping expert, making it a little bit more friendly. So those are the types of things that we did to rebrand and make a clinic a little bit more inviting. And I personally feel, and that's why I'm so glad that you're touching on dentistry is such an untapped market. It's interesting because it's almost as if nobody really wanted to touch that industry because it was so traditional in the way it's been marketed, and just the service model, really. But it doesn't have to be. And I think that dentistry is probably one of the most important next industries to transform because of the stigma. So imagine if you walk into a dental practice and the person behind the counter is, dressed in a colorful, a scrub. So it doesn't have. Well, there's an ice cream truck right now. Do you even know
I can hear
ice cream truck?
it.
Ice cream is very bad for the teeth. Let me just mention that to stay away. But see, if the dental experience was a good one, and knowing that I can go and visit my dental expert and it wouldn't be such a terrible experience. Like the thought of me going into a dental practice, it just gives me, I wouldn't say it gives me the creeps, but it just makes me uncomfortable because I know that there's the drilling. I can hear drilling happening from one room to the next, people that are going in for different treatments. It's just not good.
Right.
So my recommendation, similar to what Starbucks did, and similar to the brands that I personally got to work with and the physicians I got to work with, was whether you have a big budget or whether you have a small budget, you can make the smallest changes. Whether it's changing, instead of having a very using simple colors in your dental practice, whites that could be cold, considered cold, change it to something warm, incorporate plants, incorporate beautiful imagery of individuals with great smiles and not just Caucasian girls, demonstrate diversity, which is so important, especially today, right? With everything that's going on in the world. Brand yourself right then and there. Brand yourself by, again, showcasing different imagery of different people of different age groups and different genders. Show that you're catering to everyone and the consistency is a great smile. That's one thing. Secondly is change the name tag on the person that is greeting people. Have Lauren Smile Expert or your Smile Expert or something along those lines. And the other thing is you can transform and brand even the treatment rooms. So for example, one of the rooms could be, I don't know, maybe it'll be called like a surgical room, but it could be transformation room. You know what I mean?
That's
so
great.
Just,
that's awesome.
It's like little things like that. And then the other thing is, instead of having gloves that are transparent or just like neutral skin color, have fun with it. Go for purple, go for pink, go for blue. And if you're wearing a mask, which all of them do, and especially in today's day and age, and again, what's going on with pandemic, they need to be wearing masks. So get a branded mask. It'll say a little message on the mask. Like, it's about having fun in an environment that is usually very intimidating.
Yeah, I think that's now I've got a dog barking, right? I don't know if you can hear that, but
yeah, that's fine.
I think it's really interesting. I love that. That I think that's a great idea, like smile transformation room one or what have you. And that kind of, it's like pointing to positioning that that practice, you're positioning everything differently outside of the norm versus just accepting you're just inheriting what the next guy did, next person did. Right. And I think that one is interesting. Like, just being, and this comes back. The reason why I'm so excited is because that's exactly what I want to cover and get people thinking about. You don't have to inherit the old. Like, what are some new ways and to be unleashed? The other thing I think is really interesting is starting to get into the market research realm, where you've bought a clinic or you're currently in a clinic right now. And do you know who is in your neighborhood? Are you in a predominantly Filipino neighborhood? Are you in a older area neighborhood? What neighborhood are you in? And is your advertising, to your point, the stock image, or is it representative of the community that you're in right now? And I think that that kind of alignment demonstrates just really knowing your customer. Like Starbucks knows their customer. So I think I don't even think it has to be a huge exercise. Like excuse me, like if you go to any city website, you can look by postal code. And I've done this for clients. You can go by postal code and you can see household income. They have like the ethnicity, marital status, all of that stuff right in there. And so you could like really tailor it. And I think that would also could help you design and like, what's the look and feel? Like if you're, if you're talking about color, if you're talking about smile transformation, are there kids? If they're kids, do they need smile transformation? Maybe they do, maybe they don't. If you're doing a lot of, right? Like you could start to put things together that like really align, just click. And I think, where you're talking about ROI at the start and branding, like if you're thinking about, okay, well, what neighborhood are you in? You're talking about like smile transformation rooms. You understand the people in your neighborhood. Then what that translates to me is you're limiting the friction for people to come book with you, the friction for people to potentially not come back. You're increasing loyalty. And what does that translate to? Revenue. People are going to be more apt to come to their appointments. If they miss, they're going to rebook quickly. You're going to get positive reviews, testimonials. People are they're going to share it with their spouse, with their loved ones, with their friends and family. Oh, I had a great experience. So there's a compounding effect that's not necessarily tangible, which you touch upon that's what I got from what you just shared.
Yeah. And so I was just thinking about this when, as you were speaking, I was thinking, right now, obviously it's summer, it's starting to get nice out. And a good idea, if someone is just acquiring a new practice and doesn't really understand who's in their neighborhood and is looking to meet and greet those individuals, with a time like COVID, obviously it's very limited in terms of what you can do in an indoor setting or even outdoors, but one idea would be think outside of the box. So think about what kind of alliance you can create with another brand or another company or a local business that's in your area that caters to, obviously, again, the local neighborhood that is complementary. So here's an example. Let's say the dental practice, let's say you want to go and you want to create a little mini partnership for the weekend of finding a local ice cream shop in like some kind of really interesting, innovative solution, like kind of rebranding ice cream to some degree, but just offering something that is like tooth friendly. Okay. So
Right.
less damaging for the tooth and the enamel and so on. So that would be a good thing, because here's the thing is that a dentist understands that people aren't going to cut out sugar, but they could minimize it. And by a dentist understanding what's out there and finding alternatives for their end consumers is a really good idea. So that would be an example of a campaign they can do where they could position their brand, like maybe participate with not an ice cream truck, but like an ice cream stand of some kind, and just have their signage out there and basically, I don't know, it's just like a joint collaborative marketing blitz where all of these people, basically what's going to end up happening is kids will come, but kids won't come alone. So they'll come with their parents. And of course, that's a perfect way to get a whole family into a dental practice that you didn't know these individuals. And if they're consuming ice cream, well, guess what? They're likely need to visit a dentist. So it kind of goes hand in hand to some degree.
It totally does. I think that it's like accepting the reality and like being really aware of it versus, so I had one of our clients in City Dental Toronto, actually, shout out to Sunny Gill out there. They were doing this one campaign where they're handing out cupcakes because they're right downtown Toronto. They're like near Yonge and Dundas Square. You have Ryerson University there, all these students, and they were handing out cupcakes with like little teeth, like chocolates on them as well, because they know people are going to eat sweets, right? And so it's kind of fun, and it's like tongue in cheek that, hey, here's like, we're giving you cavities. You could say, hey, we're like giving people cavities so they come back. But I think it's like just is real and it's like authentic. Like, hey, people want to snack and they're not like, you know what I mean? It's like a little bit of sugar is not going to kill you. And so, it's everyone's choice. Either way, we'll help you if you eat a little bit sugar or a lot of sugar. It doesn't matter. We're here. I think so, that is also goes back into, there's a couple of things there. One, it's like kind of guerrilla marketing where you're putting yourself out there. Like you're thinking like, ice cream, should I be giving people ice cream? And I think that you've put, that's something I think for dentists to consider as well, that, the adage of build it and they will come, it is true to a certain extent, but with the proliferation of digital media and everybody on their phones and the attention that's so minimal, you could, like, other tactics are so important. And so like being out there with the ice cream truck in front of your practice, if you could, if your logistics, why not, handing out cupcakes, why not? So I think that it's like, once you understand, and I think, if you think about it, we could be going off on a tangent, but I'd say I'd bring it back that if you understand what your brand is about, then these actions become very natural to you, right? It's like, okay, I understand what my expression of dentistry is. I've got smile transformation rooms, or I want to be a very formal dentistry. This is an operatory
Yes.
one, operatory two, whatever it is.
Yeah.
The ideas and the marketing around that to drive patients into your practice will just be aligned all the way through. It'll be easier to come up with those ideas because
Oh,
you've
yeah.
thought about like the branding and the foundation versus inheriting something. So I think it's great.
Yeah, like an example of a slogan they could use alongside of that is sort of like, your lifestyle, our dental standards. And
Ooh,
so if,
cool.
I'm just throwing, again, we're
Yeah.
just having a conversation, and this is just something that's coming like that to me.
Yeah.
But that's the idea, is that people have lifestyles. They ain't going to change it, but, and that's the thing, it's understanding that, respecting it, embracing it, and then giving them an alternative. So I'm not suggesting that they should partner with an ice cream, an ice cream venue that has full-blown sugar. I'm suggesting that they find one where they're doing low sugar, less hazardous on the teeth. So again, allowing people to keep going with their lifestyle, but positioning something new and innovative, which will definitely get a crowd. And then at the same time, aligning your practice and saying, hey, we understand this is your lifestyle. We understand you've got these cravings. You have these sweet tooth, but like, come into our practice, we'll maintain your teeth so you don't have any cavities. So it's a friendlier approach than traditional ways of marketing dental practices.
This is great. Like I have a list of things I want to cover, but I love where this conversation is going. So I think that like for people that are listening, if you steal the idea that Tania just gave, send her a check. Her details are going to be at the end of this podcast. I think that some folks may be thinking now that, I do need marketing help. There is some value in it. At the other side of things, that these are small businesses and there's very little like to go around, right? So the other thing I would say to folks, that it definitely is investment. And then like, who would I talk to? Who would I talk? We'll get into more about like trying to help people do as much as they can by themselves. But if I'm kind of jumping all over the place, but I think it might be a good kind of segue right now. It's like, at this point, if you've already resonated with, I need help. I like this. I don't know how to do it myself. I need professional help to do this. Like, who do I Google? Right.
Yeah.
Obviously they could look for you. And like we do that work as well, but I think who do you look for? What makes someone credible? And what would it cost, right? Because the thing I usually hear about is that everybody and their mom and dad understands marketing and branding, or I don't need it, or they devalue it, right? And then you get what you pay for, and there's this whole world of upset and disappointment. And so this is for the folks that, one, see the value in branding and having an intentional marketing happening for their business. What actions could they take to make it live by getting help or support from a professional?
Yeah. Well, the thing is that from what I understand, is that there's many different types of agencies, creative agencies, digital agencies, all of that, right, that exist, that cater and can definitely help out. However, I guess what makes me or my creative agency a little different is that branding is at the forefront. So if we come up with a marketing strategy, like for example, if we say, let's rebrand the overall strategy and brand strategy, right? So just to switch out the treatment room name is one aspect of the whole experience. If the rest of your clinic doesn't have the same feel and the same friendly approach, then guess what? It's just not going to have that impact. It's not going to leave a long-lasting impression. You can find these individuals, but in my case, it's understanding how do you brand every little detail within your practice so that it's all it's very wholesome. It's a wholesome approach that brings every single thing together. It doesn't mean that you have to spend thousands of dollars to change every little thing in your practice. That's not true. Like I said earlier, you're changing naming the treatment room differently, or just maybe changing your slogan or changing the colors of your practice. I mean, there's certain things that will require a whole overhaul, and then there's other things that are just like very small little details that in time will reap a lot of benefits, because you'll be able to change your brand and the way people perceive it down the road. So it's all a matter of what can you afford? When do you want these changes to take place? And then again, you have to think of everything from what are people looking at when they come to your practice? Follow-up email, is it conservative, is it cold, is it friendly? What's the follow-up? Are you providing patients with like a picture of their smile, after every single treatment? Like, what kind of touch points are you providing your consumer? That's also a form of branding that a lot of individuals are not necessarily considering as a part of an extension of branding. Like, branding really is everything. It's, as I mentioned, it's what ties every little aspect together.
Right. Totally. That whole experience.
The experience. Yeah.
I think that, to make it real for some folks, it sounds like interview a bunch of people, get comfortable with them. And then, whatever they're producing for you has to, like, if you perceive it as valuable for yourself, right? Like when you're talking about the treatment room, I was like, oh, that's valuable. Then you're talking about like these different marketing campaigns, how it ties back, then the touch points, the pictures. Okay, is that valuable? Did I think about that? Okay, can I build that into my process? If that's something that's all valuable, then I would say continue talking to that person, because there's no standardized kind of way to go about it. I would say interview 3 people. Look at the reviews. If your friends or colleagues have used that person before, like look at referrals, and then I go from there. But just don't go off of I think if you start from a place of how can I get this done for as cheap as possible? Pricing is definitely a consideration. I just think that talk to different people, find something that is of value to your business, and go from there. Versus, and I'm only saying that because when I talk to dentists, they're super cost conscientious, and they're like, how can I do this as cheap as possible? Because they're small business owners. Like all the production that they do is going to feed their staff, keep the lights on, and then, feed their own families as well. And so I think the whole thing about doing branding is so you could actually grow your business and have it be more valuable by the end. Like we talked, we did one episode with Timothy A. Brown. He represents dental practices that are trying to sell. And for people that are trying to either retire or they want to exit the dental profession for some reason. And I think that like this conversation ties to a long-term strategy that if the branding is on point, you're driving more revenue, and you're actually creating a package that is more valuable. Coming back to the Coke example, or the Starbucks example, or the McDonald's example, it's like, oh wow, your book of business is going to have less churn. There's more loyalty there. It's turnkey, for example. And I think it'd be worth more. Like if I owned a practice like that, I would demand more, because it would translate into the metrics of the business, the financial statements, the P&L, for example. So very cool.
No, that's an interesting point. So what I'd like to mention about that specifically is that I personally think a new business, or even operating an existing business, they should think like if they actually branded themselves first, understanding the who, the what, the why, especially the why do they exist? What makes them different? Like what kind of experience are they offering people? Like once they understand that, the next step when you're working with a brand specialist, like someone like myself, the next thing that we would do is create a brand style guide. And the brand style guide is something that is so important because it sets the look, the tone, and the personality of your brand, everything from the fonts, the colors, the visuals, the verbiage. And then when you're working with, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think you said Timothy, right? Timothy, he resells. Okay. So someone like that, when an individual like that comes around, when you have a brand style guide, Timothy can then look at the brand style guide and basically use that as a selling piece to say, hey, this clinic really understands who they are, where they're going, where they're positioned in the marketplace, how they're different, so on and so forth. So it's just easier to replicate. Starbucks, the reason why they're so successful around the world is because they met brand image in every single country around the world. But they didn't do that just by complete fluke. They did it through brand training and especially a brand style guide, which is sort of like a Bible, right? So any single, like basically once you establish your brand style guide, the next thing you would do is anytime you're working with a digital agency or you're working with an outside graphic designer or you're potentially looking at a partner, you would send them this brand style guide so that they don't stray away from that. They use it as a reference point in creating all materials. So they keep expanding on the brand instead of transforming it every single time. Because the last thing you would want to do is, and I've seen this happen quite often, and it's unfortunate, but a lot of practitioners, a lot of owners, what they'll do is every single time they work with someone new, another marketing agency, that marketing agency will say, hey, here's what needs to be improved. We suggest we change the colors and we change the positioning. And then guess what? That advertisement campaign will look so, and then all of a sudden they have to change their patient materials, they have to change their signage, they have to change their business cards. Like that is very overwhelming.
Expensive.
But
and overwhelming.
It's overwhelming because you're like, okay, well, because every single person you ever speak to will always have an opinion and they'll always have, a way of doing it differently that they believe is better.
Yeah.
And that's why research, definitely conduct interviews, find someone, a brand specialist that is immersed in your brand, that is looking into your brand and not just seeing it as, hey, let's change the colors and the fonts and so on. It's, okay, let's take it further. How does your brand communicate with the end consumer? How do you want them to feel? Is it more of a high-end experience or is it more mainstream and friendly? You know what I mean? So all of these things come into play when you're defining your brand, which is why I keep saying branding is so important.
And so I've worked with designers and creatives that have produced a style guide, and they're all different. They're all different. They vary in price from like $10,000 to $1,200. I think that the dentists that I've worked with that have style guides, they have not been necessarily impressed with what ends up in the style guide, and I think that is. Again, it comes down to like the dentist that's going to do this, like that it has to be a commitment to it, because the style guide is what all of your ideas and like the voice, like if you think about another brand, let's say Monster energy drink. Monster energy drink, the language that they use, the images that they use,
the models,
all of that is different. All of it is different versus Ben and Jerry's ice cream, the imagery that they use and all of that. So I think that it's almost like the way I think about a brand guide, it's a compass. So you'll be working and like doing your day to day. And then it's like, oh, where am I again? And then you look at your brand guide, right? Like, it's not that, I'm pretty sure like as the dentists are specifically working on day to day, providing care to their local communities. It's like when if they don't have typically they don't have a full-time marketing person, maybe they have an agency or what have you. It's like you have this document as your compass, right? So you focus on dentistry. Realistically, if you don't have full-time, then you're like, okay, how do we voice? What type of imagery are you using? Like, what's the vibe, the feeling that we want to get across, as you mentioned earlier at the start? I think if people use it as a compass, and then the other thing is if you're working with someone who's reputable, it's they can take criticism and feedback. I think the process, maybe that might be actually a good topic to discuss next, is like, what is the experience, doing kind of a branding exercise for your practice. One of the outputs would be a brand guide. What is the experience of that? How do you produce it? And I think that a big piece of it is like, working with someone like you, is that you're taking feedback and that's getting incorporated, because the brand guide is not dictated to the dentist. It's actually you are deciphering what their expression of dentistry is and documenting it. Do you want to share a little bit about?
So the example that comes to mind when you mention that, the perfect example is, like, for example, going to the hair salon. Okay. So when I go to the hair salon and I'm speaking to a stylist and I'm like, hey, this is what I'm thinking. I want this color. I want this, so on, this cut. And then the next thing you know, that she expression, it seems like she understands what I want. Next thing you know, she's doing whatever she's doing. 4 hours later, I'm blow dried and I'm looking in the mirror and I'm just like, this is not who I am. Like, this does not represent me. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's an example of sometimes what happens working with branding experts. Sometimes they have a vision, but it's not resonating with the physician, the owner, right? So it's very important that you identify what is at the core, what do they care most about. Another thing is, it's so difficult. It's actually the biggest challenge, because sometimes, exactly to your point, a lot of owners, what's it called? Not, I wouldn't say dentist owners, but there's a lot of dentists that work at, what do you call it? Not a
Associates?
practice, but just associates. I mean, there's sometimes numerous individuals that are working there. So you don't want to brand it too much one way and then turn off either your associates or your partners or so on and so forth. But the point is that you really need to understand it resonates with you. So what I always suggest, usually when I work with a client, I'll do the research, I'll find examples of different images. It doesn't always mean that it's from the industry when it comes to dentistry. It could also be outside of the industry. So I'll present different images, different verbiage, colors, that sort of thing. And it's sort of like process of elimination. That tends to work really, really well, and sometimes it could be a very tedious process because it takes long to get to where you want to go, but it's worthwhile because you're guiding your customer all the way until they reach a point where they're like, yes, that's it. You nailed it. This is the style I want. You got me. Like, it takes a while, but once you understand, like, there's that click, that light bulb turns on, you'll know it, they'll know it. And then they'll feel that excitement. It will no longer feel intimidating. It'll actually feel like, okay, let's get this going. Like, let's move forward. So there's a different exchange in energy and feeling there as well.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Which we covered. Okay, I have here a brand guide. Let's see what else I got here. So for a branding exercise, if you had a client that approached you, what are some questions? Because it really, as you, the branding expert, I think if it's done correctly, it's the expert is asking questions and then synthesizing that data. What are some example questions that I guess a dentist would want to consider or have the answers to, when you're having those consultations? What are some of the important questions that you would ask folks?
That's interesting, because usually when I'm working with a new client, I'll tend to go into their practice and I'll get an experience myself, like as though I was
okay, interesting. Yeah.
And so sometimes I can do that and not really achieve that. However, when you do get the chance of actually being immersed within the environment of the client that you're dealing with, I usually don't ask them questions at the beginning. I just look at their marketing brochures. I look at how it was greeted by the individual at the front desk. I look at the treatment rooms. I look at how I feel when I'm in there. I look at the energy of other individuals that are waiting for their turn. You know what I mean? So it's as a whole, I'll examine everything. And then after that, of course, then I'll ask them specific questions in terms of what kind of clients they see, what has been the type of feedback they've experienced, or the complaints or, improvements that have been noted, some remarks that have been made over the years that maybe were ignored. So those are the types of questions that I would ask. And then the next thing is definitely showing them some examples of different businesses that are doing things differently and getting their perspective on it. So getting their feedback. At that information, then I'm able to now ask more questions pertaining to if I'm on the right page, like if my assessment is in line with them or not. But it takes a lot of research and, leading up to that. So I never just start by asking them questions. Like it doesn't, I do the research beforehand as much as I can, as from the get-go, and then I'll ask them questions. But by the time I'm asking questions, I already understand, and I already identified the areas that could be improved.
I think that's bang on, but like what we talked about from before, it's that, it's almost in folks, like in a person's blind spot, because your expression of dentistry, like you don't know the people, you're just hiring the people that you have comfortable with, like in terms of
Yeah.
your employment, the colors that you pick, the location that you picked. Like there may not be necessarily a whole lot of intention around that, but it does represent who you are and implicitly your expression of dentistry. So I think that that's great. Like you're really being a mirror for folks, that here's the expression that you're giving off,
Yeah.
and then trying to find some continuity across all of these different kind of experiences, like the in-office experience, the website, the
Yeah.
the materials, the brochures, all of that, all of the different assets that are available. And like, hey, what is this experience? What am I feeling from all of this? What would the public or your potential patients be feeling? And then once you articulate that, getting even a reaction, it's like, is this what you want to portray? Because that's what is kind of standing out.
Yeah.
No, I think that's a really clever exercise, and I think totally worth doing for everyone. The other thing then is, if you have a practice already, like, someone who's listening to this, they already have a practice. The signage is the signage, it is ABC Dental. The building is the building. The print material is the print material. And they may be thinking that, you know what, Tanya, this sounds so great. I love everything you're saying, but this is like, I'm not going to change the name, the logo. I have to change like my checks now, my business checks, like all this
Yeah.
stuff. Right. So like, this is just not accessible to me.
Yeah.
What would you say to a person that's interested and has all of that? Like, is that a story that they're creating, or is there still something that people can do if they're already entrenched in what they've inherited?
Yeah, well, the consistent response I see, and then the consistent issue that I've noticed, is that a dental practice wants more clients. And if they don't want more clients, then they're looking to either get media appearances, looking to do more public speaking opportunities. There's always something that they're looking for. Sometimes I've noticed that physicians are just interested, or dentists are just interested in doing it for their own, how would I say, like they just want to do it because it makes them feel good. It's like, hey, I'm proud. I want to walk around with like I want to feel proud of everything that I've achieved, and so on and so forth. But the thing that I've noticed is that I think everyone can always look at diversifying their revenue streams, which is what we started with. So remember when I was telling you that I've noticed that a lot of dentists are now expanding types of treatments to incorporate. So for example, what I've noticed when I went to the dental office not that long ago, I saw a sign and it said, consider doing Botox and fillers, or consider doing a facial, or consider doing an eye treatment as you're waiting for your treatment to set, whether it be because basically a tooth whitening process or treatment could be, an hour, sometimes a little bit more. It depends how much work you're doing. So imagine if you already have that person sitting in your chair, what else can you sell them, or what else can you do to elevate their experience so that they want to keep coming back and they talk about you to other people? So here's an example of something that one of the places that I've been to had incorporated not that long ago, and it's probably very inexpensive. So as I was sitting there and I was waiting for as I was getting my treatment done, they came around and they had like this warm wax that they made me dip my hands in. And at first I was kind of, obviously now with COVID, like that'll never out the window. However, it was a really cool concept because I put my hands in there. It felt very warm. And then they put saran wrap or some kind of material over it. And literally all it did was hydrate my hands for the period that I was getting the treatment. And then I removed it. It was like I said, it was like candle wax to some degree.
Oh, wow.
They removed it and my hands felt so nice and soft. So it was just, I didn't expect that I was going to get my teeth fixed and at the same time leave the clinic feeling soft and all. So it was just a way to diversify. So if you're not looking to rebrand your entire practice, we'll find unique ways of just elevating the consumer experience.
I love that, because once you get your teeth cleaned, they do feel clean, but then you kind of forget about it.
Yeah.
And like once you eat, like you say, if you're at work, you go to the dentist's office, you know, before lunch or after lunch,
Mm-hmm.
and then you're out, you're not, there's not a mirror in front of you the entire time. And so you forget, but your hands, like you can feel it. Like you, it reminds you, oh, I was at the
Yeah.
dentist. Like, where did I get this? You know, I think that's super clever. No, that's
Yeah.
awesome. I think that those type of activities, um, again, spawn out of a branding exercise and being thoughtful, whether you use a professional or like spend the time and write down, like, you know, why do I exist? Why is
Yeah.
this clinic exist? Why did the team I hire, why did I hire these people? And
Mm-hmm.
see if there's a theme. Like, be your
Yeah.
own observer of like,
Yeah.
why did I pick this clinic? Why, you know, why haven't I made certain changes? Why have I made certain changes? Why are you know, things the way that they are as of right now? And
Mm-hmm.
what experiences all of that? Like, what is that all? And then what actions or activities could I take to expand the experience? I think that
Yeah.
the brand and that experience is going to
Mm-hmm.
be what really sets you apart, um, and is what's going to have
Yeah.
the ones that do really well versus the ones that do mediocre.
Yes. So another example, you know, how I was mentioning earlier is when you walk into a clinic and you just hear the drilling. Like, I'll be waiting for my turn, and although I'm not getting a treatment with any drilling required, I can hear people
Yeah,
getting some kind of drill in their mouth, and
yeah,
I know what that's like. And so it just brings this uncomfortable feeling to myself. So instead, it's like, okay, so how can you make your treatment rooms a little bit more soundproof so that we don't have to hear what's going on behind those closed doors? And the other thing is, how do you enhance the aroma inside the dental practice? It
mm,
always, in my experience, it smells the exact same no matter where you go. I think they obviously have certain protocols and you know, yeah, protocols in terms of cleaning and hygiene and so on. But who says that you can't have your dental practice smell like your favorite hotel? When I go to a hotel, I'll
ooh, I
never
like
forget.
that.
Yeah, there's one. It's called Short. Every so often, I'll be in a random area or going into a store, and I'll get a whiff of that smell that I had, you know, that I experienced when I walked into that hotel, and it brings back so many wonderful memories. And right away, I have this pleasant experience, and that's what I mean by branding, because there is a thing called scent branding, scent marketing, right? That is something dental offices should definitely incorporate, because it's, again, part of the sensory, like creating an emotion within your patients.
Hmm. That's amazing. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Tanya, is there anything else? I know we're at like the hour, but is there anything else that
It went by
we
so
could
quick.
talk on and on and on, but is there anything else that you want to share or touch on?
I think the only thing that I want to wrap up by saying is, you know, it, again, you don't have to, you can do this yourself. Okay. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to incorporate all the things that we mentioned. I know even just thinking about adopting all of the changes that we proposed could be, but my recommendation is, if you don't have a budget and you're looking to gain some knowledge and elevate the experience within your clinic, maybe do a survey, you know, give some treatments, free treatments for, you know, 5 individuals of different age groups and different genders as well, and then get them to provide feedback about your practice, everything from how they're greeted to the touch points afterwards to the experience in terms of getting their teeth fixed, so on and so forth. Ask them, and then give them something, obviously, because you want to be able to give them something in return for their efforts. But that would be the quickest way to elevate your customer experience. That's one thing. And two is that we have packages that are strictly just brand strategy, brand assessment. So we jump on a call, video call, that sort of thing. If you're not local, we can do a Zoom call, kind of like what we're doing right now. And the individual will give me a tour of the space, and then we'll just go into, you know, like analyzing, like basically a test. So it's basically just a strategy call, and then we'll provide some suggestions. So you don't have to do everything, you know, from beginning to end. You could do the beginning, which is a strategy session. You can do a brand style guide. If you want to do the full overhaul, then of course that would be combined with a digital campaign. I mean, there's so many different things that, that could be done afterwards, but you can start by doing it yourself. And if you don't want to do it yourself, then we can do a brand strategy call, and that's it. So we can customize a plan for you, just like you would for your clients.
Totally. That makes total sense. So what we'll do is, where can people catch you, Tania, if they want to get a hold of you or reach out and connect with you?
Yeah, the best place would be the website, pampersplurge.com. I'm pretty heavily active on LinkedIn. So if you just want to follow up and see what I'm posting about, what I'm sharing in terms of tips and tricks when it comes to branding and marketing, that's another good place. Or Instagram as well, under Tania Semper. And that's about it.
Awesome. And so we'll have that all in the podcast speaker notes as well. And yeah, for everyone that's listening, give me your feedback. If you liked it, you loved it, you didn't like it, I could do something better. I read all the comments, and we're trying to make this as valuable as much as possible. That's why we have Tania here today. So thank you so much. And again, thanks so much, Tania, and we'll be in touch.
Sounds good.
Okay. Take care.
Okay. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.